So I'd like to present you work done by my colleagues on how we assess bot success. So LivePerson offers a platform for text-based communication between brands and consumers. As such, bots are integrated quite naturally in our platform. And indeed, many of our business customers incorporate bots in their processes. And these bots can be of various types. We have FAQ bots, routing bots, sales bots, service bots, and many other types of bots. And what we found is that no matter what type of bot you build, it's not going to work perfectly from start. You're going to have to revisit the bot, adapt it, and run this process again iteratively. And in order for this process to be efficient, you want to recognize the points of success and points of failure. You want to know when to reiterate again. So what is bot success? Here are two examples of successful communication between bots and consumers. On the left, we see that while seated in the stadium, you can scan this code and order a beer directly to your seat from a bot. And on the right, we see Rose, a concierge bot for the Cosmopolitan Hotel in Las Vegas, offering tons of information in a very humorous way to the visitors. So success has several aspects, one of them being resolution, which can be defined as a set of actions that eliminate the need for further engagement. Now, this may seem like an absolute definition, but we find that resolution has perspective. Here we see the consumer writes, "I don't want these shoes, what's your return policy?" And the agent responds, "We don't have a return policy." So from the agent's view, there are no more steps he can take to eliminate further engagement. The issue is resolved in his perspective. But I doubt it's the case for the consumer who's still stuck with shoes he doesn't want. So the agent perspective is actually very informative for bot builders. And the points of difference between the consumer perspective and the agent perspective are points of interest for the brand. Do you hear me like this as well? Yeah, okay. I hear a lot of echo. So it's, these points of disagreement are points of interest for the brand as points of potential improvement for the process. But in terms of who determines whether there'll be further engagement or not, it's the consumer's perspective that's the main goal here, and this is the perspective we'll take from here on. And usually, traditionally, this information is retrieved by asking the consumer at the end of the conversation, a simple yes-no question, were you able to get an answer to your issue? So resolution is different from satisfaction, which is another aspect of success. Satisfaction is important for the brand, for instance, for customer preservation, and amongst other things. And it's inherently a subjective thing. This information is also usually retrieved by presenting a post-conversation survey with a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 or 1 to 10, asking the consumer to grade the degree of satisfaction from the interaction. So what we see here is the distribution of satisfaction scores as given, let me see if you see that? Yeah. So the distribution of the satisfaction scores as given by consumers, and this data comes from a specific brand, but actually the shape of the distribution is quite typical, and we see that most of the people state that they're extremely satisfied with the interaction, but we'll soon see that it is not to say that everyone thinks so positively about what they experienced. So resolution and satisfaction are, of course, connected, but the relation between them is not a simple one. When conversing with a human agent, we see that practically all consumers that stated their issue was resolved were satisfied. But then we see that from those that stated their issue is not resolved, over 50 of them were still satisfied. So let's see an example of how this can happen. The consumer again writes, "I don't want these shoes, what's your return policy?" But this time the agent responds, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we don't have a return policy. May I offer you to check out our exchange market?" And it's probably the empathy that the agent shows towards the consumer that is reflected in the high satisfaction score that the consumer gave, despite his issue not being resolved. So basically, we would like to follow both resolution and satisfaction. They're not the same. But we really don't want to use surveys for that. Surveys are problematic, to say the least. So the first major problem is the low fill rates. And we see that when conversing with a human agent, only 1 out of 5 consumers will fill the survey that's presented to them. And the situation is even worse for bots. So this phenomenon is mostly due to the fact that people don't like to do things they don't have to do, like filling a survey. And it's also partially related to the fact that there is some bias in the presentation of the survey. So human agents, we often see that they encourage people, consumers with whom they had a good correspondence, they encourage them to fill the survey. And bots are often designed to present the survey, a resolution survey, for example, only if they detect that some resolution was achieved. And so this brings us to the second problem of survey, which is that they are biased, and I'll soon demonstrate this again. But in any case, this is not what we want. We would like to know how the conversation went for 100% of the consumers, and without asking them to do anything for it. And indeed, in Live Person, we have created a tool that does exactly that. We call it the Meaningful Connection Score, MCS. This is an automated way to dynamically track the sentiment over the conversation. So what this tool does is it tracks consumer message by consumer message and aggregates the sentiment of those messages according to a model that we've developed, such that you can see how the emotional expressions of the consumer change throughout the conversation. In this example, in a very positive way. And it's through this objective tool that we can now test what we suspected happens with the bias. So what we see here is on the y-axis is the percentage of people that filled the survey that was presented to them. And on the x-axis is the MCS score. That is the overall satisfaction that the consumer exhibited during the conversation. So we see that for people that had negative MCS, basically they were not satisfied with the conversation, not many of them filled the survey. However, for people that were satisfied with the conversation, more and more of them filled the survey in a gradual manner. So the happier people are with the conversation, the more they tend to fill the surveys. And that's a significant bias that we see, and a significant note of caution for those who take their information from surveys. So this is an awesome tool. Let's use it for bot consumer interactions as well. But as we all know, interacting with a bot is not the same as interacting with a human agent. Bots often simply don't understand what we want. So in this case, the consumer wants a grill, but is offered with delivery options. Here, the consumer states explicitly, I will reach out to your competitor since you cannot answer. Thanks. And the bot politely responds, you're welcome. So we also see that consumers write less text messages per conversation. This is somewhat by design because the bot often requires a click-based answer and not a textual message. But amongst the textual messages, we see that consumers tend to write less words, and most significantly, most importantly, those words contain less sentiment. So people express themselves less emotionally when they converse with a bot compared to when they converse with a human agent. And it's for these reasons that we found we cannot use MCS for bot-consumer interaction. But what we saw is that people not only behave differently during the conversation, but also following the conversation, they have different fill patterns for the surveys. And we actually see that the correlation between resolution and satisfaction is better in the bot world compared to the human agent world. And we see the distribution of satisfaction scores here. This is a different pattern than the one we saw before. We see that many people have no problem at all stating that their experience was extremely dissatisfying when they conversed with a bot. So this phenomenon is also a combination of things. I think that a major part of it is that indeed, like we saw before, conversing with a bot can be very frustrating and indeed extremely dissatisfying. And maybe a bypass of that is the fact that probably people, when they communicate with bots, especially bots that don't understand them, they lack that human-to-human relation. They lack some sort of gentleness that maybe they have when they converse with a human agent. that maybe makes them respond slightly more gently or more forgivingly when they place that satisfaction score. So this actually makes things a little bit easier for us for the current state, because what we see is that in the bot world, resolution and satisfaction are equivalently indicative of how successful the conversation is. And so that's great. Let us continue and track only resolution. So moving towards automated bot resolution, we're still faced with many challenges. We would like to be able to generalize to the non-survey population because we know we do that. We always want to improve NLU. Perhaps we should build empathetic bots. We would like to detect online whether the consumer abandoned or not. There are some significant challenges here in defining a good product that will be useful for various use cases. The architecture of this product needs to be strong and stable, and many more. And my take-home messages to you are that you should define what bot success is to you. You should mind the gap, the difference between conversing with a human and with a bot. Generalize with care. Mind that surveys are often too optimistic. And the most important takeaway message is join us. We have interesting challenges. We have tons of data, and we're hiring in Ra'anana and in Tel Aviv, looking for scientists, engineers, product managers, leaders, and more. Thank you.